My name is Rick Barraza. I'm an experienced architect at Synergy Systems. I am a recovering Flash programmer. It's been 11 months since my last control enter, but I've really been digging Silverlight. At Synergy, we do both Flash and Flex development. And we started the WPF Silverlight practice last year, and there's a lot of really, really exciting things going on there. So we're going to talk about Silverlight specifically from the mindset of somebody who's been working with Flash for a while. That was the general idea, but we're kind of seeing, can I have by a show of hands, how many people have worked with Flash, feel comfortable with basic action scripting in Flash? Okay, great. How many of you guys, I'm trying to figure out what tone I want to set here because it's so over the board. How many of you guys would consider yourselves, at least a large aspect of yourself, to be a designer, or an aspect of what you do to be a designer? Okay, that's what I need to adjust because I thought the audience was going to be a little bit bigger, so let me switch over to a little more code then. How many people, so the rest of you are developers, how many people here are kind of fuzzy in your position that you really don't know what your business card title is supposed to be? You might go from user experience architect, diviner, just ninja might be on your cards. If you are in that spot, that kind of fuzzy spot between designer and developer, then this will probably be of interest to you. If you're not in that spot, I'm going to be showing some. Oh, okay, thanks. If you're not in that spot, if you are a developer, we are going to be showing Silverlight 2.0 bits, but there are certain things that we're not going to be going over in this lesson. So I want to let you know up front, in case you're thinking something a little bit different. We're not going to be going over the styling or the built-in controls that are in there. We're more approaching the change in Silverlight 2.0. How do I come with my interactive developer mindset to Silverlight 2.0, especially if I came from a Flash background or with a certain Flash bias, where I'm used to thinking, I'm going to create a movie clip, I'm going to put it on the stage, I'm going to put code in the on-enter frame, and it's going to do whatever I want. It's that part that we're going to be looking at. We're going to start off very, very basic, because I don't know where you guys are, but then we're going to start doing some deeper things. At any point, please ask questions, but these do gradually get complex. The focus also of this talk is specifically, we're going to start where tag-based animations kind of start ending. There are certain things that tag-based animations are very good for, sliding in, sliding out, layout. But when you really want to start doing things like I'm moving the mouse and I'm scattering dots around the screen, I want to dynamically create these visual elements on the stage, I want to create that type of immersive, interactive visual experience. It's at that point you're not seeing a lot of stuff written on Silverlight yet. I'm sure it's going to be there because it's following a lot of the same growth curve as in Flash. But there's a lot of focus on rich internet applications. That's going to be where a lot of the money is. But the focus of this class is really how do I have fun with Silverlight right now? Because having fun is what's going to start attracting in the interactive experience programmers. And the language we'll be using mainly is C#. So we're going to jump straight into code, and we're going to look at the first demo. How many also, by the way, have had a chance to play with the Silverlight 2 bits that were released today? I can see, so not, okay, that's what I was hoping. How many people, though, have played with the 1.1 bits and gotten their hands dirty with code? Okay, good. So that really is the target audience that I wanted that feedback for. We've played with 1.1. When you download the 2 beta, a lot of things are going to break. And a lot of things that we've been doing for the past several months, including the downloader, kind of aren't there anymore. So this is kind of a whirlwind tour of 2.0, specifically in creating user controls, user elements, manipulating their visual layers, and then doing it through code. So let's start off without further ado. Let me come over here. And I'm going to fire up Visual Studio. And create a new project, and we'll just call this project Mix. Now, since I've created a Silverlight application project, one of the big advantages we have now with the 2 beta is it does a lot of that web creating a launching website for you automatically. It was one of the great features that I liked. So we're going to say, yeah, add a new web solution for hosting this control, and it creates that. That one-click functionality was good, especially for people, if you are like me, coming from Flash to the much richer legacy of .NET and the visual environment there. There are a lot of things that it can be a very big learning curve if you're coming from Flash or Flex, but it definitely is worth it. Visual Studio, I've completely fallen in love with it as my primary development environment now. So we see on the solution side, the solution comes in, we have the web that gets brought up. We look at the default page, but that's actually not the one that does anything. It's kind of like an appendix. We're not really sure what it's for anymore, but it's still there. The money makers here are it creates the mixed text page and HTML page. And what that is referencing out is our actual Silverlight application. Now, since a lot of you haven't seen this before, I'm going to go slow these first couple minutes because there's a lot of new things that you might not have seen. And we have been looking at them for a while, so please shout out questions if there's anything too new. But in our Silverlight application, one of the biggest changes from 1.1 is it introduces an app.xaml. If we look at this app.xaml, let me close the other stuff really quick. So let me look at this app.xaml and the code behind. This app.xaml is pretty much empty. It has its application resources. If we look at the code behind, though, we see that Silverlight Beta 2 has given us a lot of functionality here, so that right away we have the instantiator, and it hooks up events for startup, on exit, and unhandled exception automatically for you. You can plug those in here. And on startup, here's where it says the root visual of the app page is equal and instantiates this particular page object. So we have the app wrapper, so it's moving Silverlight closer to how WPF is. If we go to page XAML, though, we're going to find the other thing that if you have been playing with 1.1 for a while, this is going to be kind of the bane of your existence if you want to port all of your old stuff over. Page now extends directly from user control. So when we see this, the app is going to come up. It's going to set this object as its primary root, and this object comes from user control. Every control that we're going to use now works the same way. This is a little different from 1.1, where we started off, and with page, it was easy to do something. But then when you actually try to do user control, things started getting very difficult. You had to do a local root, find name, and everything like that. We're going to see the experience is much, much easier now. So right off the bat, that's that. Since I have the web service all plugged in, if I run this for the first time, oops, I have to do something. Let me come to page XAML. Now, if it's white on white, sometimes that's hard to see. So if I run the solution, the first thing it does pops up if I want debugging, I'll say OK. And right away on the page frame, it comes up to the width and height with the 0 margin and padding up here. If it's on the page, I'll be throwing out the shortcuts we have. If I take out width and height from this, let's make the background. It's also one of the things I personally don't like. It always starts up in grid, though I understand why some people like that. But everything we'll be doing today uses canvas. So let me do a canvas background. I'll do a very fast linear gradient. It'll start at the upper left corner. It'll end at the lower left corner. And we'll do a nice basic red fade. So on my page element, if it's been taken into application, and I knock out the width and height and I run it, comes up full screen, nice gradient, and so that kind of follows me around wherever I go. We're going to talk a little bit later of when you are dynamically slicing, how can you procedurally capture what the new updated screen width and height is, because that's pretty important if you're coding your own interactions. But we're kind of just getting this first part set up. So I have this set up. Any questions yet at this point? And some of this is new, but nothing's too hard here. We're just kind of going over the new stuff. So with our page control, let's go ahead and let's add another user control here. I'm going to add a new item. I'm going to say it's a Silverlight user control, and I'll just call it ball. Okay, now ball comes in. Canvas, I'll get rid of the background. Now for this user control, I don't want to define anything in terms of the larger wrapper. I'm really going to just make a ball. I'll have it ellipse, I'll fill it with white. Width will be 30, height will be 30. And I'm going to go ahead and set the canvas left of this ellipse to -15 to automatically center it for me. Again, coming from that flash background, when I'm translating what I see visually in my head or what we see visually in our head when we're working with Flash, it's easy to move the registration point around. If we're dealing with such a basic element as this, this is perfectly acceptable if we're only shooting for an experience. So we've created a white circle, 30 by 30, that's aligned around the registration point of this user control. And if we look at the code behind for ball, there it is, it's that easy. So what we want to do first, again, and I promise they get more complicated. I'm starting slow. When we come up with page, first thing we want to do is let's just add that ball dynamically to the stage. So in my page element, I've been finding that with 2.0, with 2, plugging things in directly here doesn't always pick up things like storyboards, like elements that are going to be visually on the stage. So although I didn't start coding this way, I've recently become a big fan of putting things in a loaded event. So when this comes in, we also know that my canvas here was called layout root. So let's just do that. I'm going to say ball, new ball. I'll say b.setValue. Let me just give it a name really quick. Name property ball. b.setValue canvas left property. So 300. b.setValue. These are all things I'm sure you guys have tried before. 300. And we will say layout root, which is the default name of that start canvas, children, add, B. So, I'm sorry, was that a question? Yeah, so. Yeah, the loaded is pretty much when everything's said and done. We kind of start off here in the constructor, and you can definitely hook into a lot of events, and there are changing things that are coming in, specifically on what we're focusing on today in terms of dynamic visual elements that need to reference storyboards and other user controls and their XAML. This is kind of like the last guy you can plug into and be pretty safe. You're pretty ready to roll at that point. So at this point, we've given it name, set a left and top property, and if we run it, we should see a nice ball at 300 by 300. So at this point, we can say, well, I want the ball to actually follow me, or let me move the ball when I click it. I kind of did something I shouldn't do. Let me add a function here. Private doesn't return anything. We'll just call it add ball. There you go. Now, I'll add a ball. Let's start making this a little bit more expansive. I'll say this dot, mouse left button down. Automatically creates the event handler for me, creates the function for me. Again, I'm sure you guys, I am sure there are C# programmers here that are far better than I am. We at Synergy, we have some really, really good C# programmers. I've come over from Flash, so I'm kind of like the artsy kid brother, and they're kind of being forgiving with me and working with me here. So definitely as I'm going through, I'm not I'm showing how I've been porting it over from Flash. It's a learning experience. We're all still going through. 2.0 brings some cool stuff, but this is just one of those things that I go, that's pretty neat. Because in coding in Flash, although I love it, I've been doing it for such a long time, all of this automatic creating the event handlers for you and automatically popping stuff in, I've just really fallen in love with Visual Studio, which probably says a little bit more about me than I'd care to admit. So when I've pushed on the mouse, I want to move ball around. The problem is that I define ball here, so let me come up here and define it up here so I can reference it. I can say B dot, and here we get to a problem. If you're coming from the Flash background, all of this stuff, set value canvas.left property, a value set canvas right property, after the 100 or 1,000th time that you've written it, really, really starts getting irritating because I'm so used to doing _x, dot x. So let me show you what we normally do, or what we've been doing here. I'm going to go back to ball, which we've defined here, and here's the code behind. And let me add something that I've started adding to all my user controls that really make it a lot easier. I'm going to make it a public. It's, of course, a double. I'm going to say x. Now, when I tell ball.x, it's, of course, going to have to get this dot get value, canvas left property. And I have to say it's going to be a double. And when I set it, I can say this dot set value, canvas left property, the value that came in. This has literally been a lifesaver for doing a lot of fast, iterative, dynamic, math magic type stuff. Do the exact same thing for canvas left and canvas top. And at this point, we're good. Now, I copy and paste this in just about every single user control, and it makes it so much easier when you're working on it from page. So let me come back to here. Now it makes it a little bit easier. When I click on the mouse, I want to tell the ball to go straight there. So I'll say b.x is equal to, now my mouse event args comes in, just like it was in 1.1. I'll say get position relative to me, the x property. It makes it tremendously easier to work with just x and y set up here. In fact, this hurts my eyes so much, I really don't like looking at it, so let's just do that. Okay. So let's run it. Of course there is. An assignment call increment to this thing. Thank you very much. I am so glad there are good programmers here. Again, that's a great idea. What I'm doing here, I'm starting at the basics and moving all the way up. So if I were teaching this as a class, and again, my focus was primarily designers, we're starting basic and definitely going through. This is not, let me clarify that again, this is not enterprise-ready code. But this is for people who are designers who have been told, you cannot do code, here are nice little tags for you in Blend. It's not that hard once you port it over. Flash is a great learning ground, but Silverlight has a lot to offer. But that's a great example. All of these things can definitely be taken to a much better level. You run it, and it should be click. Again, nothing too impressive yet. But it does start forming the basis of what we're doing. Now, at this point, we can say that's fine and dandy, but let's start growing this out a little bit more. It sure would be nice if the ball didn't just magically pop where I went, but if it moved to wherever I click. Let's make it a little bit more interactive. So at this point, we're going to introduce a dynamic storyboard. Like with many things we're showing here, especially in these more primitive examples we're giving, a lot of the things can be done with traditional storyboards. But toward the end of the talk, I'll be showing some things from 1.1 where it really starts seeing, it would start getting prohibitively difficult to start doing this all with storyboards that you've defined in XAML. And a lot of times it's like you don't have to. For certain very basic things, just make your storyboard up on the fly. Well, actually, I'm not telling you what to do. I'll make it up on the fly. So let me create a storyboard. Up here on my loaded, I'm going to say storyboard is equal to new storyboard. I'm going to give it a completed function. And I can say this dot resources dot add. And here I've seen a lot of examples online and even some of my older 1.1 blogs where I would previously need to set the name property of storyboard before adding it in. If you didn't, it would break. When you add it directly on resources, you can now add the string key directly. So I can give it a name there and say add that object. And it keeps working. So I've created a storyboard. All we need to do is an sb.begin. But what happens when the storyboard is completed? Well, a couple things. First thing, when I click, I have my events here, and I'd like to be able to get them in the storyboard and continually reference where it was. So I'm going to come up one more time, and I'm going to create a point object. I'll call it mouse. It starts getting me a lot closer to how I'm used to thinking of things in Flash. I'll give it a new point of, say, 0, 0. And when I click on the mouse button, I'm going to say mouse, which is a point, is just equal to e get position this, which returns a value of type mouse. Once I have it there, I can always reference where was the last place either the mouse clicked or the mouse currently is outside of this event. So let me be kind of gratuitous with my processor and start it right away. Yeah. Let me run this, and then I'll definitely talk about it because it visualizes it. Thanks a lot. And again, all those questions, please shout them out because I don't know where you guys are coming from. I really don't. So designer questions, developer questions, if I can, I'll answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll either lie convincingly or hopefully point you to somebody who would know the answer. So at this point, let me just say it now. When I'm creating a storyboard, the way I'm creating it, it's very much, it's going to work very similar to an on-enter frame with a couple differences. If I just create this storyboard and I haven't set any other properties on it, duration or to or value or anything like that, if I create that storyboard and it's in my resources and I fire it, it's going to fire at the rate of 1 frame of whatever my frame is, and it'll be done. Unlike on-enter frames that just continually fire on their own. So if I want this to be continually firing on its own, when it's completed, I would just say, you know what, start back up again. You see a lot of different approaches to doing this. Some people prefer to use timers. Some people prefer creating an empty storyboard tag in the XAML and then hooking up to its completed event and maybe doing a couple things. What I'm showing is one alternative. It's the alternative that's worked very successful for me for a lot of the projects we've done, including all of the blog postings. But this, I like this because, if you are coming from Flash, it's really one of the easiest ways of getting into it. I've created a storyboard, which you can think of it as almost a single event on enter frame. I've added it to my resources. When I fire it, it's going to play once and stop. But once it plays once, it's basically creating 1 frame, and on frame 2 saying go to and play frame 1. You know, the old, that's going way back for any Flash 4 people out there. So if I do this storyboard complete function can now work as my on-enter frame. I should probably, if I really wanted to make it better, I'd have it call another function and everything like that. But we're not doing anything too advanced. We're kind of doing a whirlwind tour, so I'll just keep all my code in there. And what I'll want to do is I'll say b.x is equal to mouse.x. and b.y. We're still not animating yet, but at least we're going to see if what I've changed to start getting there still works. Please let it work. So now we have the clicking event, but what's going on, anybody who is a serious developer, and I'm sure there are a lot of you out there, you should be cringing wildly right now, because I'm wasting a tremendous amount of cycles in between doing something that doesn't need to happen. Whereas before, we hooked up to an actual event, a specific event. When I click on the stage, do something. Here, we're running a storyboard. So whenever I click on the stage, all it does is update the mouse, but the storyboard is continually putting dot in whatever location we give them. That would be gratuitous if we just did this. But with a couple very basic changes, it turns into an easing algorithm. That's this. If it's constantly running, it kind of goes back to that Zeno's paradox where you can't really ever leave the room by crossing half the distance because you never get there. So the first step's really big, and then half of that, and half of that, half of that. The math to that is very, very easy to do. I mean, it's so easy. I've actually taught artists how to do this in Flash, and so now I'm trying to teach designers how to do this in Silverlight. But you start off, you find out where you want to be, which for us it's going to be the mouse X. You subtract where you currently are. That'll give you the distance. So this automatically, let's say I'm at point 50, and I want to go to point 75. By saying, where do I want to be minus where I am, to 75 minus 50, it's 25. It can tell me a positive 25 distance, and you get there. What's nice about this is it works both ways. If I'm at 50 and I want to go to 40, where I want to be minus where I am, 40 minus 50 gives me negative 10. In either case, it keeps the signs for me, so it's a really, really nice algorithm. This will do the distance. So if I really wanted to, and you guys probably don't want to copy that, but I could probably do this. Let me just look at that for a little bit. I'm calculating the distance, and then I'm adding it to wherever I am. There's a big difference here from what we just did. We were blindly moving B to wherever we clicked. Now we're making a couple calculations. How far away are you from it? Then add it to where you currently are. You kind of start moving yourself. So I could say, just to prove the point one more time, I could do this. So by calculating the distance and adding it to where I currently am, nothing's changing yet except for my thought process. I've gone from blindly moving it. Now it's still moving like it was doing before, but it's no longer the loop that's controlling B blindly. We're making B calculate the distance and then add it to your location. If we're going to do all that work already then, and if the storyboard's consistently running, you don't need to take the whole step at a time. I found, because Silverlight runs a little bit faster than Flash, I would always use a fraction, say 0.2 or around there, and do it to your style. Let's just multiply it by a fraction. Because this is constantly running at the frame rate. So you're telling B, if you're here, calculate the distance, but then only take maybe 12% of the distance. Because I know that right away, the on-enter frame is going to fire off again, and I can take a little bit more. But since we're using a percentage as opposed to a fixed amount, when we run this, we get the Helvetica of easing algorithms. It starts off very fast, and it slows down as it gets to the target. Now that was a little too slow. Let me speed it up a little bit. Take a slightly bigger step every completion. All right? So I click, and it moves. There are a couple things. I called it the Helvetica of the easing algorithm because Helvetica is one of those things, if you're a developer and you don't have any design sense, you just put in Helvetica and it makes it look better. This easing algorithm, it's one line of code, where you want to be minus where you are times a percentage. You can use it almost every single place you're doing procedural animation, and it looks good. People like it because it mirrors the way things usually work in the real world. We start off big, broad strokes when we go to reach something, and as we get there, we slow down and we get more specific. And that's what this easing algorithm does. Where you want to be minus where you are times a percentage, and you always get this kind of more flow effect. There were a couple hands out there? Yeah. There is definitely a point where the fractions start getting so small, and of course eventually it gets to a point that just memory-wise it's going to start being zero, that the visual need isn't there for it. That's a great point. So let's show in this environment, if I were doing that, what I normally do, and I'll type it in. I don't think it was on my notes, but I'll just do something like this. Kill. I'll set it at 0. I found that usually around 60 cycles, it's enough to get us there. So I say if kill plus plus, only if kill plus plus is less than 60, do we need a storyboard to begin? So at this point, you can start feeling a little bit better about the processing speed. Because when I click, it starts to... Thank you very much. I'm so glad everybody's here. So, am I missing something? Thanks. So at this point, I click. Come on. Where am I? Last move, kill, 0 minutes, get best position, must be completed. Thank you very much. This is why I shouldn't be changing code real time, but like I said, rolling this together. This is the last time I modify code directly in response to a question from the audience. I'm just kidding. Let's keep doing it that way. So here at this point, I click. It starts the storyboard. The storyboard will run for 60 times. As long as that counter is less than 60, it's going to be moving it. And once it's more than 60, it just stops calling itself. This is another advantage in coding it this way over Flash. For that on-enter frame, you almost have to actively stop that on-enter frame. Here, you can use a very basic kill count and only call the animation when it's within a certain range. I have rarely found any animation to require more than 60 counts. Usually at the speed. Now, of course, that's based on how you want to fudge it. But at this point, very basic. This example, we're going to move on and start adding a little bit more complexity. But this example really covers that kind of broad range of topics. We're starting a Silverlight 2.0 project. We want to create a very basic user control. We want to attach that user control programmatically on stage, because if you recall, our XAML doesn't have anything. The balls XAML barely has anything. So procedurally through code, just like I would in ActionScript 1, how can I attach a movie, hook into an on-enter frame, and have it respond to mouse events? And this is that translation from Flash to Silverlight for that first, most basic ActionScript 101, day one projects that you would do. We create a user control. We attach it programmatically through stage. We create some type of animation loop, and we have it respond to mouse objects. Any questions before we start moving on to the next one? No? Sure. Yes, you can. In the yeah, you can definitely be tweaking that. I'm not going to show that here because I'm not going to do that. Fall for that twice. I personally feel that the 60 frame rate is a bit gratuitous in Silverlight myself, especially the more you start doing the stuff we're talking about today, where you're calculating so much math and you're moving stuff. You can definitely get experiences you couldn't do any other way, but at the same time, come on, movies, 24 frames a second, 29.97 frames a second. Is it really such a big deal that we got to say Flash's default is 12 frames a second? We got 60 frames a second. Yeah, come on, let's just give it to them. If we drop that down to 40, if you start doing a lot of math, if you start doing a lot of custom 3D engines and stuff like that, that's the first place I would start. I would go in, I would drop that frame rate, try it out at 40. 40, you should be just as smooth. Nobody's going to realize the difference between 40 and 60 except your processor, and at that point, they'll start seeing a bad experience. So great point. So, sure. I'm glad you asked that. He works for Synergy, but no, I'm just kidding. That's exactly what we're going to do next. So the takeaway points for this first project, starting very basic, using dynamic storyboards on your enter frame. The kill switch, great way to save processor. Using a user control as a movie clip, add that X and Y. It will save you so much time in your experimentation. And of course, the easing equation. Where you want to be minus where you are times a percentage. Tweak that percentage, al gusto. So the next one, we're going to look at user controls that govern themselves. And at this point, it's exactly how do we start moving that storyboard into the user control itself. Okay, so in this environment, actually, let me see if I can come over here. I forgot to pull something out. By the way, there's a great book that we got in the package, Silverlight 2. When we have time, as the last example, we're going to talk about images because the downloader went away. So if we have time, we'll do that, or we can do it at the open sources. But there's a really good section on it at the back of your book. It's in your packages. There we go. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to come to the solution. I'm going to add another project. I'll call this project 2. Now it's going to ask me, do you want to just leverage the same web server we automatically set up for you? I say yes. Let it go ahead. And we're back up to where we started. So I don't have to describe too much. I can just do it very quickly. Change the canvas. Let's make sure we're in the right spot again. So let me change that color to green. And if I run it, the solution should automatically build with this new project as my launch experience. If I get a 400 by 300 green square, I know I'm good. Hey, look at that. Okay, so let me cheat a little bit. So I'm copying the same nice red gradient from there over to here. But I know I'm in the right spot. Let me close all these other windows. So project 2, make sure I'm opening up the right page, and we'll get to the code behind file. So at this point, we're going to focus more on how would I have modified the previous ball to control itself through code. I'm going to add a new item again, Silverlight user control. I'm just going to call this one dot. So here we go, dot comes in, be very similar to ball. Automatically zap the width and height. Switch from a grid to a canvas. Make it an ellipse. I'll give it a fill of white. Make it a little bit smaller this time, maybe 10. Height of 10. Canvas left of -5 so that I can auto-center. That's, of course, not required, but since we're doing so much about placing them wherever the mouse is, and we're using circles, move the origin to or move the registration point to the origin. Good. So we have at this point the fill. A lot of the stuff now is going to come into the code behind of dot itself. So let me open that up. Hold on, give me one quick second, make sure everything's right. Okay. Okay, so before we can show that, though, we're going to have to add the dots on the screen. So let me put that code very quickly. It's going to be the only code we have in page XAML. So I'm going to come over to here. Let me hook up to the loaded event again. Come over here, and I'll do something like save everything. This dot mouse move. So I'm trying to type here and look over there at the same time, so my Mavis beacon must be breaking. Okay, so on mouse move, we've created an object called dot. It's a white dot. We have a canvas to be working with. Just put a basic count variable. I'm going to say dot d is equal to new dot. Let me set its name property. And I'll call it plus, a very, very common Flash way of thinking right there. And we will, so you guys don't have to suffer me typing too much. Let me copy all the XY stuff again. Add it to dot's code behind. That made sense? Not too fast? Okay. So here I could say d.x is equal to e dot get position this dot x, and d.y is equal to e.getPosition this dot y. And here, I'll just add it to the same layout root. Layout root.children.add. I'll add d. So we should get our red gradient. And as I move my mouse, I'm dynamically attaching the dots. You could probably keep your 2-year-old entertained for maybe 30 seconds with this. So a couple bad things going on. First, it's kind of boring. Nothing's going on. And at that point, we can decide, do we want page to be moving the collection of dots, or do we want each dot to kind of be self-governing? We're going to choose the latter, have each dot be self-governing. Also, the more I do this, after a couple minutes, it's going to start taking its toll on its memory. So we're going to look at both of those things. How do we dynamically kill them in a self-contained way, and how do we have them move themselves? But this is all the code we need in here for right now. I do want to point out one thing. Layout root, again, is the canvas right here. Just file that away in the back of your head because it's going to come up right now. So now that we have all that stuff, let's go into dot. And let's give every dot their own storyboard. Just like we did it before, I'm going to say storyboard SB. And because storyboards get a little touchy, I'm going to do it on every dot's loaded event to be on the safe side. I'm going to say SB is equal to new storyboard. SB.completed, do that. And I'm going to see SB.begin right away. Inside my storyboard completed, let's do this incrementally to test it one at a time. I've already defined the x property for this dot. So let me just do something like x plus plus. Plus. Let's run this. And of course, I forgot to do the most important thing, restart SB. You can see that whole flash bias in me that I'm not used to doing that. So we restart the timer. At this point, if I move it, and it's still not going. Thank you very much. Forgot to add it to its own local resources. This.resources.add, SB, SB. So now we move them. They're all moving arbitrarily down off the screen. Still doesn't get away any of our issues, but at least we're starting to add the storyboard. And you can see it starts lagging a bit the more we start doing it. Let me close this before anything crashes too badly. Good. So at this point, let's start thinking. Let's have it pause a little bit first. Let me say if count is greater than 30. And I'm also going to add a kill switch really quick. No reason. I'll change it for another. No, you're absolutely right. I'm just so used to typing double. Here's one of those new things you had to pick up. Kill plus plus is less than 60. So what's going to happen here, if you guys can kind of figure it out, I add the dots. They're going to now wait for a little bit, and then they're going to move down for 30 more clicks. All right? We're slowly building up to something. Now, a couple things here. I've put in now the explicit if-kill statement so that after this, I can say else, kind of like, otherwise, I'm kind of completed with everything I wanted to do. I want to stop here and absolutely acknowledge that this particular animation that we're doing right now would be a perfect candidate for a XAML storyboard. because we can do the begin time on the storyboard, we can give it a duration, we can even do an easing, and we can hook into its onCompleted event to then fire the code that we're going to do right here. So if this were the, even for this project, the simplicity of this project is such, I'm doing it in code only to show you the thought process behind it if you were to do it that way. The animation we're creating here, though, would be a perfect candidate for XAML-based storyboards. It's also a nice candidate for a basic example of this type of thinking. So what we want to try and do now is we're saying up to 60, and you know 60 didn't seem long enough to drop. Let me say do 90. Okay, it's still awfully slow, but that's cool. We can start tweaking that. But when it's all done, how do we get rid of it? In Flash, the answer is you can do this guy. This is just something, if you're coming from a Flash background, you're so used to doing a this.remove movie clip or delete this. It's been there forever. It's kind of how our thought process is wired. You have a storyboard. At the end of the timeline, you throw in a this.remove movie clip, and everything's nice and easy. The problem with this, though, or even setting this to null, all the different tricks you might try. The problem with this, though, is it doesn't really work in the stronger language, in the more enterprise environment of .NET for a couple important reasons. Primarily, over here in Page, when we've added it to the layout root, it's already in that collection. So in this mindset, to just go ahead and pop it out, try and delete it, we're not sure what other references it's going on. If you're building RIA and you're managing data, this is a horrible thing to do. But we're not doing that today. We're not looking at that type of stuff. We're looking at creating interactive experiences. We're looking more from a Flash mindset. And in a Flash mindset, with Flash biases, it's perfectly reasonable to have visual elements on the stage that come in, do their thing, like maybe fireworks, it explodes out, and then they all drop down, and then they remove themselves, instead of having them fade off into the distance, into the long good night, kind of die, and then peek up and say, "Psst, I'm dead. You know, take me off the screen," to somebody up. So what I'm going to show right now is definitely qualifies as a hack. Only to be used for these types of visual environments. Otherwise, the real developers in your company will most likely take you outside and beat you. But this is how you do it if you want to do it. This.parent. I know I've been putting it in a canvas because that's what I always do. I normally don't put it on the layout route. As we'll show in the next project, I usually create an empty canvas and pop it in. But from inside the user clip, I can grab a reference to my parent. Say this.parent, working with it as canvas, children, remove, me. I can tell the serious developers by the cringes on your face because you would never, ever do this in a re-environment. If you're working with this type of visual experience, it's a one-line lifesaver. It really, really does the job. Well, I hope. Let me run it. Make sure. Start there. So at this point, I can keep doing this for a long time, and now it won't choke up because everybody's kind of taking care of themselves. They do their storyboard. It's intensive. Probably it's as intensive as many dots can be on the screen at any given time. But everybody kind of takes care of themselves once they're done. Since I know I have that working, and I don't want to just leave it like that, if you bear with me, my designer side's coming out a little bit. Let's make it a little bit prettier before we move on. Let's not just have it plus plus. What if we give it acceleration? And according to the laws of physics, acceleration is a double. So we can say x plus equals to accel. And then we say acceleration is itself adds up a little bit. Now you're saying, oh, sorry, I only want this to drop. Which makes sense. We want them just kind of drop. You might say, where'd you get 1.2? That's not exactly accurate. That's not my physics. Well, whatever. We're coding the experience, so let's do it by eye. So 1.2, let's try it out. Good. So if I know that that's working, and I did first things first. I made sure that it was still removing itself, even if it's off screen. The last thing we really need to do is let's use the easing equation, the same Helvetica easing equation we used for position. Let's use it for transparency. This dot opacity, and the equation is always the same. Where you want to be, at this point we want to be at 0, minus where you are, times some percentage. So at this point we run it. And now you have kind of a Perl drawing program that can keep your 2-year-old entertained for at least 5 minutes. Wives, not so much. So, does that address more your question on having the storyboards internally in the user control? Okay, great. So let's switch back. Some takeaway points we wanted on this one. There is no remove movie clip equivalent from inside the user control, and there's the one-line hack if you want to use it for non-important stuff, for visual stuff. There it is. The pros and cons of this approach, we've talked a little bit about it. You might want to look into, if you wanted to start digging deeper into the environment, and we have this debate back and forth at work all the time too, registering up events in the user control, so when they're done with a particular transaction, it does it properly. It registers up to the parent. The parent can then take care of all the other stuff and then remove it if it's available, if it's the proper thing to do at that point. It was one of the things where I didn't know if I should go through all the code on showing events because it really goes into a different environment. But on Synergy blogs, on our Synergy website, Mike Wolf, who's in the audience, and I'm sure he'll be in open source after the class and he can talk to you guys too, he created a very basic eventing bus that makes it pretty much one-line pain-free as well. But that would probably be the right way of doing it. Having the control do its thing. When it's done with its thing, it raises up an event so that the parent can then decide how it wants to process its children. Okay, and finally the third one in this style. Let's look at putting a lot of dots on putting a lot of elements on the screen, and then having one function that kind of shepherds all of them at the same time. Any other questions on this one before I close it out? Okay. Close my mouse. You guys bear with me one more time. Let's do this again. Add a new project, Silverlight application. I'll call it project 3 now. Hook into the same guy. And it's going to start up in the same way. Let me come in and just copy the same XAML. It's got a nice gradient. We'll change the color this time to more of a we'll drop it from red, we'll drop it from, say, black to, I don't know, gray. Okay, we got rid of the width and height, so if we run this, we should start up with a black to gray gradient full screen. Let's just make sure we're in the right spot. And there it is. That's an awfully dark gray. Let me lighten it up a little bit. Good. Oh yeah, without a doubt we can. On this one, we are going to talk a little bit more about the color objects and setting it in code. So that's a great transition. I'm used to working with colors this way, so that's my preference here. If you really want to do, yeah, oops, sorry. Without a doubt, you could have gone that way, and that's fine. Or not. Yeah, okay. Well, let's, and anybody remembers it, there it is, it's the English gray or British gray? It's the A. That's one of the areas where they always mess it up on you. You got to figure out where you're typing, because sometimes they do GRE Y, sometimes GRAY. So, yeah, we'll use those just for you. Okay, so at this point we have our layout. Let's very quickly add a certain type of, another type of dot object to this. Let's see, sorry. So for that user control, we'll go back and call this one ball again for this one. On this one, let me try and do this quickly. Again, sorry for all the boring part of watching me type stuff I've done 3 times now. Get rid of the background. We're inside of ball directly. I'm going to give it an ellipse. This time I'm going to name the ellipse. I'll call it background. I'll give it a width of, say, 10, height of 10, canvas left of -5 to position it, canvas top of -5. And I don't have a color yet, right? So I'm going to say fill. And here I'm going to give it, let's just make it white right now. Now it's 1, 2, 6. A lot of times you see the 8 colors. On that one, the ARGB, the first 2 values represent the transparency of the object. We're going to be talking about that in just a couple more minutes when we actually get into manipulating the color of this user control. But that's where, if you haven't had a chance to play too much with Silverlight yet, that was one of the things that kind of popped out at me when I was starting a while back. The first 2 are just your alpha, your opacity. And probably black on black might not be the best thing to go right now. Sorry, that was my fault. Okay, so here we have, it's ball. Let's come into, or the bad thing of naming things, everything the same. I always lose my spot. Let me open up page. I'm going to open up ball demo. So let's quickly, let's start. First things first. First step, let's just add a lot of balls on the screen. Let's do that pretty quickly. What I'm going to do is I don't want to add these to my layout root. So inside, I'm going to create an empty canvas. I'm going to call this balls. It's just right there. I'll be adding them to the balls children because it's now a visual element on the stage, so it makes it a lot easier on the code. So here I'm going to also, just to be on the safe side, hook into loaded. And here I will call add balls function. And we can start popping that out pretty quickly. Hold on. Balls. Y is less than total balls, I plus plus. New ball. Let me hook up the X and Y on ball, if that's okay with you guys, really quick. That'd be faster if I just copy and paste. Okay, so the only code we have in ball right now is just the X and Y shortcut. P.x. Now we come in. I want to create a random scatter on my screen. So without a doubt, I need to put everything on hold for a little bit. I can create a random variable here. Because of how we're going to do things, it might be better for me to move that actually out here. So make it public. I'll create random R. So in here, let me say r.next, and I'm just going to guess right now. It'll be a low guess so that we can see the fault in this. 800 by 500, but it'll give us back something. And then we say B, let me give it a name. Let's hook into I to make it unique. And then I can say balls dots children add b. So first, let's see if this works. Kind of create logical breakpoints. There we go. We asked for 50 dots all in a for loop, and they showed up. But a couple points here before we get too deep, because I'm really trying to throw out all the little shortcuts we've learned the hard way the past couple weeks, trying to condense those down for you. If you've been working with 1.1, you were able to access the screen width and height using the system, interop, browser type object. That changed when you download your 2 bits. So it took me a while to figure out where in the world that went to, because there still isn't a lot surprisingly written on 2.0. So let me show you what works for me, and there might actually be a better way, but this is what works great for me. We want to figure out, the question is again, how do we reference? Because we saw if we took out width and height from the page, user control, it automatically appeared full screen. We move the screen, and all that stuff's kind of taken care of for us. So because of that, how do we hook into it in code proper? So let me pull it down, and it is using a reference. Let me make sure I get the reference right. Excuse me. Sorry about this, hold on. Here we go. Here we go. I'm going to, again in that same Flash mindset, let me create a, I'm going to create a screen width variable. Again, because I'm going to want to reference this from other areas. So I probably could have gone that way. But here's how you pull it down. You can do a using system Windows interop. Is that already in there? Okay. So down here, we define a system.windows.interop.content object. I'm going to pause very quickly, only because it took me forever to find this thing. And if you're in that same position, porting your 1.1 examples, here's where it is. System, Windows, interop, content. So from there, because of how we're going to do things, let's just start storing it right away. And our screen width is equal to our content dot actual width. Since we're using these with X and Y, that's why I'm making them double here. And let's just force this over to double right now. Content, actual height. Okay. So at this point, we've grabbed the content. We're only grabbing it once, and we're storing it locally. So if I then start wanting a random number between screen width and screen height, and just because random gets a little funky sometimes. There we go. So it's covering the full spectrum of everything that's going on. Before we start moving things again, we talked about the screen width. Let's get to the question on color. What if we wanted to color those user controls? Let me show one fast way of doing it. If we go back to dot, that's a really good question. I don't know the exact answer to that. With 1.1, I'm not sure. I need to play around a little bit more. That's a great way. I mean, we can do some things to test it out quickly or in the open space. I was just so happy I found it. I kind of went with it. Great question. We'll look into that a little bit more. From when I was trying on these, from the code that was going, I was running into certain problems. And my mindset in coming up with this code was specifically, it goes back, like, I don't know if you guys saw the Project Maestro demo or whatever. On a lot of that, it was going on different resolution screens. So a lot of what I was looking for specifically is I was looking at the full frame browser for readjusting, for dynamic layouts. I don't want to get too boring on what the thing, but the thought process. The 1.1 project I've been porting over is a very dynamic layout control. And when you'd move the screen, you needed to hook into the screen to that particular event. And it was at that point you then queried, and I was storing in local variables. So that was working for me. So when 2 came out and that broke, my mindset was, how do I fix that specific solution? And that's what's kind of plugged in here. I'm sure there are other ways of doing it. You can definitely try it. This is the one that tried and worked for me, and I was rushing to get this code. Yeah.
Does the interrupt cover Firefox, not just IP specific, right?
Again, great question. I don't know. It's definitely the things that's new. It's one of those 2.0 things that are new. So I personally need to play with it. We all need to play with it. It's all kind of like just past couple weeks coming out. Haven't played with enough to answer those questions specifically. If you figure it out, rick.braz@synergysystems.com, so please drop me an email and let me know. So we have this area here. Let's go back to ball really quick. If you recall, ball, the ellipse, we've now named it. And one of the nice things in Silverlight 2.0 is we don't have to do that whole define it as an ellipse, then do ellipse is equal to this dot find name, all that nonsense we had to do at 1.1. Once it's named on the stage, it's automatically available in code, which is really, really nice. So let's come in here and we'll create a public function. It'll return void, and we'll call it setColor. We're going to pass in a color. Really? Are you serious? I'm terribly sorry. The countdown here says 23 minutes, so that's why I've been going so slow. I did not realize we only had 5 minutes. Thank you very much. It's still 2:45. I'm going to move all of this to open source. Anybody who is interested, feel free, or to the open pit or whatever it's called. I'll be there the whole afternoon. You guys stop by if you have more questions. Let me just finish this up really quick then. Thanks a lot, Mike, for the heads up. I'm sorry. There's so many things to go over. Let me do one thing. Let me start going at full speed. What I want to do is I'm going to create a public variable. We're going to skip the color stuff. If you're interested about color, please hunt me down and we'll show it in a more intimate setting. Let me create very quickly 2 velocity public variables. One of the nice things on .NET 3 is I get to do the getter and setters right away. Okay. So each one of these dots comes in. We give it a placeholder for its velocity. When we come over to the page and we're setting this type of stuff up, we can say b.your velocity x is equal to, and let's fire off some random velocity setting. I'll make it a little bit slower. Pick a number from 0 to 5, an integer from 0 to 5. So at this point, we're adding the balls on the stage. They have their x position random set. They're getting a random velocity setting. So let's have one storyboard function that kind of rules all the animation up here on page, like we did before. And again, I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit faster than I should. SB is equal to new storyboard. I know some of you guys are leaving. There are some great maps by Microsoft. It will not offend me if you guys have to get to other classes and you want to pick up one of these things. While we're talking, we should probably only be like a couple minutes long, more. But they're right up here if you guys want to pick them up before you take off, or if you want to hand them up. Thanks a lot, Mike. So here we've had a new storyboard, sb.completed. Let's look into that just like we've been doing. This.resources.add. SB, and we'll start it off. One of the very cool things about how we're adding it into the empty canvas, and they're all kind of the same thing, is, and here in SB we'll just have SB call itself again, is this is a perfect opportunity to use the for each statement. Say for each ball B in balls. And again, coming from that Flash environment, this is a great time saver. We're not really used to thinking that same way. For every ball in our ball's empty canvas, they've already been added, so now I instantly have a straight reference to them. I can say their x is plus equal to their velocity x, their y is plus equal to their velocity y. Let me start it again. Oh, sorry. In balls.children. That's the enumeration collection. Run it right away. We can see, I'm going to run out of time. I will put the code here as well as the remaining final lesson on images. I'm terribly sorry. I thought that the countdown was accurate. I'll also be showing that in the afternoon because I'm finishing. I don't have time for the big finish. The big finish was working with transparent PNGs, because if you're coming from Flash, that's where the thought process is. We see a lot about rendering, we see a lot about XAML, see a lot about these paths, but if you go to any of the current top Flash sites, how many of them are really fully rendered XAML, or how many of them are using transparent PNGs as part of their navigation interface? You're going to find that in the Silverlight community, we're talking a lot about graphics, we're talking a lot about paths, about doing all this stuff in XAML and keeping it in Blend and in XML. But when it comes down to it, when you start creating professional user experiences online, and we really want to make Silverlight shine, if we're really going to want to make Silverlight compete with Flash in this type of overdone, rich experience, purely visual, not RIA, not enterprise, just purely visual, eye candy magic, we need to have a strong ability to be working with transparent PNGs programmatically. And the sad point is that the downloader object is no longer present in 2. It was probably the biggest shock to me on what came out. Where did my downloader go? I'll be talking about this in the open space. And a very, if you go online and you look, you're going to see, I know because I've seen the documentation, a terribly, terribly overdone way of how to load images into your XAML procedurally, using a web client, opening up a stream, bringing in the stream, building all that stuff in, and setting it as the source. I mean, it terrified me because nobody coming from a Flash background would want to go that bad. Downloader was at least decent, but the whole web client opening up a stream, bringing it in, is really, really hard if you're not in that mindset. There's a very easy way. It is in the back of the book that Lawrence Mulroney wrote. It's probably one of the main pieces of code, but we're using a very basic. There's a new bitmap image. I was upset when I found out downloader went away. Then I found out bitmap image, what we're doing with streaming, and that's turned me around. I'm actually very excited about where Silverlight is going, but there is a 2-line piece of code to getting images back into your XAML procedurally, and there they are. You can define the straight URI to the file name, create a bitmap image, BI, which is new to Silverlight, very, very exciting. I really want to start playing with that more. And then the third line is for any image on the stage, set its source equal to that BI, and you're good to go. 3 lines of code. It's actually much cleaner than what downloader was, but that will probably be the big shock if you're coming from a 1.1 interactive experience. I got to get going. The next class is up here. Thank you very much, everybody. But there's the posters back there. Thanks.